For the last decade, I've been on a mission to help people find expansion in their lives through holistic well-being, physical, mental, and spiritual. This journey, of course, started within with my own healing and then expanded outwards in my career teaching movement, meditation, and healthy eating, as well as practicing energy and sound healing. Through this journey of self-discovery, I have come to learn that my core purpose is to use my voice to facilitate healing for others. On this podcast, I interview expert guests to share some of the tools, approaches, and thought processes that have helped me delve deeper into what it means to be a spiritual being living a physical existence. Tarin Calmeyer is an holistic corporate wellness expert, certified yoga teacher, and trained osteopath. After 10 years of teaching yoga and mindfulness, leading team retreats and consulting, she founded her company, Remote Team Wellness, with the intent of helping companies transition into this new space of remote working and navigate the extreme and universal stress of the pandemic. Their services span from virtual corporate wellness initiatives to in-person team retreats. To date, the company's clients include Meta, Dell, L'Oreal, and Netflix. In this episode, Tarin and I flow through conversation focusing on the practical and personal application of some of the ofttimes abstract concepts often spoken of in the spiritual and personal development space, such as surrender and the process of grief, as experienced personally by each of us. If you find value in this episode or any other episode and would like to support me in getting the podcast out to a wider audience, you can make a donation. Currently, I'm not trying to make a profit from doing this podcast, but I really do believe in the ideas, people, and different healing modalities that I'm sharing with you. And I would love for more people to be able to benefit from it. Of course, there are other ways you can also help me. Share your favorite episode with as many people as possible and leave a review on whichever platform you're listening. This both gives me feedback so I can continue giving you more of what you like, and it serves to improve my ratings on the platforms. And honestly, I would just love to hear from you. I so deeply appreciate every message of support and thanks that I've received, and it really touches my heart when I hear that the content has been meaningful for you. Go to my Instagram account, click on the link in my bio, and find the tab labeled Support the Podcast. You can donate as little as $5 or even less by entering a custom amount. Any amount will be greatly appreciated, and once I reach $100, I can use that for marketing the podcast and getting this info out there. And now on to an uninterrupted podcast with Tarin Calmeyer. So I think I'm actually going to start a little bit backwards. Normally I would start at the beginning of somebody's story, but I'm so curious to hear about your move to Mexico.
Yeah, definitely. It was actually probably one of the more difficult moves that I've made in my life, just because I knew that it was kind of detaching from a lot of like familial stuff and a lot of being familiar in Johannesburg. I'd really come to a place of like healing my relationship with Johannesburg, because for the longest time I was trying to run away and run away and run away from Johannesburg. So when I finally like made the decision to go to Mexico to reunite with my partner after lockdown, it was almost like this moment of just like, I'm good with Joburg. I don't feel like I need to run from here, but it's just finally time to move on in a healthier way, and kind of letting go of the urgency to get out, because that's something that I held for a really long time. I more wanted to move in the spirit of just a new ground, a new
That's
chapter.
Beautiful.
So that was kind of the intention that I went into the move with.
So rather than running away from something, you were running towards.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
and
beautiful.
I think that was kind of an insight that I got from lockdown, just to not allow myself to get too stuck in the things of the past, and really allow myself to think more about what I want to create instead of what I don't want to create. Because I think for the longest time I was in a little bit of that funk of like, I don't want that, and I don't want that. And that was how I manifested the things that I did want just by finding the things I didn't want. But now it's almost a reshift of like, what do I want? Not just focusing on what I don't want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point to bring up, because I think we do that sort of almost automatically, rather than thinking, this is what I want. We think, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. And then we mold our life around avoiding the things we don't want, rather than only focusing on, and first of all, getting clear on what it is that we want, and then focusing on and running towards that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
And I think getting stuck too much in that loop and stuck too much in that story, you see more of that, the things that you don't want. And it gets harder to almost detach yourself from those things, because you are almost drawing them into your awareness by constantly focusing on them. So, yeah, that's been something that I've really just been trying to catch myself on.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember where I first picked it up. I don't know if maybe it's like a Bible thing, because I grew up in the Christian church, but I remember being quite young. Like, I must have been a young teenager, and I became very aware of the saying, what you behold, you become.
Yeah.
Because so often, like, let's say, for example, with a parent, if you have an issue with a parent, then in your mind you'll be like, I don't want to be like my mom or my dad. I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be like them. But then that's what you're constantly focusing on, and then you become exactly like them. I mean, we see this all the time.
100%.
Yeah. So from quite a young age, I had this thing in my mind of what you behold, you become. Or obviously now the like popular phrase in the New Age spirituality type of thing is where attention goes, energy flows. Which
Definitely.
is, of course, very true.
It's extremely true. Yeah. It can it shapes your whole reality, and I think just being aware of it helps to inform that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that is your fate or your destiny or anything like that, but to just keep consciousness of, I maybe am a bit of a product of the things that I have seen, and how is that playing out, to just bring that constant, attention back to the fact that is something that is playing out at all times. Like, what you have seen is going to be on a bit of a loop. You kind of empower yourself a little bit more to actually just choose a different way, or to be able to make a choice, rather than to be in a state of just like, well, I don't want to do that. That's what my parents did, but then you're doing it anyway. So just staying aware of your own behaviors and your own triggers, I think it's a challenge for all of us, but it's such an important awareness.
Tell me about the business that you began. Did you start the business while you were still in South Africa, or as you got to Mexico?
Yeah, so I actually started that business with my partner. So basically, just to give you a little bit of background, my partner and I were traveling all through 2019, and then we ended the year in South Africa in Cape Town in 2020. Did New Year's in Cape Town, and then he said that he needed to go to the States to visit his family. And I just had this feeling, for whatever reason, that I wasn't going to see him for a while. And so that last week that we were together, I was so emotional. I had all of these feelings. I was just like, I just feel like I'm not going to be with you for a while. And he was like, chill out. And then lockdown obviously happened, and I didn't see him for 10 months. And so in that time, we were having all of these phone conversations. Our relationship obviously changed to a virtual connection. And to kind of bridge the gap between just, I think long distance gets really difficult if it's all just about like when you're going to meet up again, or, missing each other, or like the space between, the distance between you. So in that gap, we were trying to find productive things that we could do together to to actually keep us connected in a deeper way, in a deeper, more fundamental way. So I started offering him meditations just because he was really stressed with everything that was happening with his business. And he'd always said, like, meditation doesn't work for him. He is literally an energizer bunny. He's all of the energy in the world within one person. and so I was like, no, I feel like if you just learn a few simple breathing techniques, you might understand meditation on a different level. So I'd love to teach you some breathing techniques. And so we just started doing that virtually, and he started seeing benefit from it. And so he was like, if this can work for me, this can work for other people. Would you mind if I start inviting, like other colleagues or like startup founders or anything like that? And I said yes. And so we started doing a few events for other businesses and business owners. And through that, I just realized that there was this gap in the corporate wellness market, especially because for the longest time, everything's been so reactive and focused on, like cessation and all of these things and like blood, like cholesterol and blood pressure and all of these things that are, yes, measures of overall well-being. But when it comes to things like, deeper mental, physical, emotional, things that actually need attention during a global pandemic, there wasn't really a support network or a support line for companies to actually take care of their employees. So I realized that this is something that I could actually start to offer to corporates in a way that was digestible and understandable for that world, rather than it being something that is only accessible for like people who are spiritually aware or spiritually inclined. It's like, no, people actually just need very simple techniques and tools and practices to help them to cope with the things that are inevitable and going on inevitably in the world that we find ourselves in today. So that's kind of how the business got its root, and that was kind of my why, because I just kept seeing all this stuff about burnout now being a huge buzzword and a huge topic, and I just think that if we're going to make our new world, our remote working world, our whatever world it is that we are cultivating, sustainable, we need to be able to take better care of ourselves, and that needs to be integrated into how we're working as well.
I love hearing about businesses that start so organically, rather than sitting down and thinking, what can I do as a business? Coming up with an idea. It just sort of arose from what you were already doing with your partner, which started as an exercise and getting closer. That's really cool. I love that.
And I, like, to be honest with you, like, I had that iteration of business before. I'd been like, what can I do to make my passion my business? How can this happen? And it's funny because the message I kept getting from that every time I'd be in that space of like, I need to do something with all of the things that I know, or it was always just kind of wait and it will unfold, like it will
been there so many times.
Right? Literally, temperance has been my hugest lesson, my just learning that sometimes there is a right place and a right time, and
sometimes it's just not time yet.
Exactly. And so, like, I found myself in a lot of spaces that have fed me and led me to this specific space and this specific time. And now I realize that none of it has really been in vain, even though there have been times in my life that I've been on very different paths. I see myself really connecting to all of that wisdom now to create what I'm trying to create with my company. So,
I think that's something that we have in common, and a lot of creative types do.
Definitely.
And a lot of us do tend to gravitate towards things like teaching yoga. But I know quite a few people like me, like yourself, that's not the only thing we do. We've just got such a broad array of interests, and not just interests, but skills that we can offer to the world. And sometimes it can get frustrating because it feels like your attention is split over so many different things. But there's something inside telling me that it's all important. Haven't yet figured out how it all fits together, but it's all important. And it's only like now recently that I've started to feel how it's all coming together cohesively, and how, yes, it really does all fit together, and every little part is important.
Yes.
And so I can see that in your story as well. It's really great to see that.
100%.
Sometimes in the moment it doesn't quite make sense, but something inside is telling you that it is important. And then later on, it becomes a part of the puzzle.
Exactly. And I think that also just comes down to realizing that nothing is wasted. Like all of your time, everything that you experience and that you're going through is something that you need to go through. So again, if you finding yourself in situations that may challenge you or that may be difficult, and when I have found myself in these spaces, instead of letting myself sit into this place of like, why is this happening to me? How do I get out? How do I get myself out of the situation, because that's always my natural way of thinking.
Of course,
like, how do I get myself out of this? I need to get myself out of this.
How do I fix this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Can you just start to actually take a step back and be like, how did this happen? Like, why am I here? How did this happen again? Usually it's an again. If it's something that you're trying to fix and trying to get out of, it may be a pattern. It may be something that has happened before.
What is the lesson here that I'm not seeing? That needs to keep repeating for me to learn it. Or like a great question is reframing it from why is this happening to me to how is this happening for me? Yeah.
All of that.
So just before we started recording, we had this really great little conversation about this very topic. So maybe let's get back into that again.
Yeah.
This topic, which for me always comes up as the word surrender. Or like, I'm sure you know the yogic term, Ishvara Pranidhana. That has been such a tenet for me in my spiritual journey right since the start. It always comes back to surrender. And just as I think I've got it, the universe shows me that I don't, and I need to learn it again. And we were touching on how when you are feeling called to do something new, or you feel like there's something that you haven't quite got right in your life yet, there's that something else that you want to be doing, or you have this desire to serve in a better way, whatever it is, our tendency is to search for it.
Yes.
How do I figure it out?
Yes.
How do I make this happen?
Yes.
And so what happened for me last year was I kept on getting the message to surrender, drop all of the labels, because the way that our society is set up and the way that we're encouraged and coached in business and in marketing, it's always about putting the label on yourself, explaining who you are, what you do in one sentence that everybody can understand. Tell the world who you are.
Yes.
And I was busy going through this business mentorship where I was being told this is what I have to do. Meanwhile, every day in my meditation, I was getting the message, drop the labels. Drop the labels, just surrender. And eventually I got to the point where I couldn't continue in that mentorship relationship. And I was like, this is not working for me, because this is what my soul is telling me I need to stop and listen and wait. And it's really hard to do that, because it's fucking scary and it can be very stressful if there are finances involved.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important for people to know, just because you make the decision to surrender and have faith and trust in the universe doesn't mean that it's not stressful. And it doesn't mean that you don't have your days where you're going, what the fuck is happening? How do I fix this? I need to do something. I can't just sit here and wait anymore.
Totally.
But if you just keep on coming back to it with that dedication to the practice of surrender, eventually what you're doing is you're creating space for the answer to arise organically and naturally, without you fighting to make it work, get the answer, figure it out.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's like everything just clicks into place, like so gently and quietly, without a fuss, and all of a sudden you're in the flow.
Yes.
It's like you just slip into the river.
Exactly. It's like fighting
upstream.
It's so true.
Yeah.
No, and as you were speaking, it's so interesting, because surrender has also been such a huge word and theme and thing to feel through for me. And one thing that I kind of realized was coupled with surrender, because for me, another thing that I find quite challenging and that I resist a lot in getting to that flow state is allowing, like, because when we surrender, we just let ourselves let go and let it what happens happen. But we also have to be in the space of allowing it to happen,
That's such a great point.
Really allowing it in, allowing ourselves to let what has been surrendered flow away. Let it actually completely go, so that whatever is coming in can come in with ease. And so that you can continue to flow in ease. Because just like you were saying, when you are in that resistant state, and like there's always this push-pull, and you're fighting yourself, obviously. It's
this great internal battle.
Yes.
With just you and yourself.
Just you. Seriously. And it gets to this point of like, why am I not allowing myself to do this? What permission have I not given myself? in this space that is stopping this from coming into my life? It's definitely a question that has to be checked in with regularly, especially when you do encounter the places where you're like resisting the next or the new or expansion in some way. Because I think that piece of contention and that piece of that I think when there is an expansion coming, or when there is a level up in your life coming, there's always going to be resistance. There's always going to be like, I want to stay where I am. I just want to be comfortable. I just want to be safe. I just want to be where I know I am secure, or where I've built myself to be secure. But really coming to a space of being like, okay, I know that this is the best thing for me, for my highest good. How do I allow myself to get there? How do I give myself permission to actually step into that new iteration of my life? It's a constant lesson.
Yeah, it's that death rebirth process.
Yes.
And the rebirth process is always challenging, difficult, sticky.
Yes.
And I think it's great to, how you just mentioned, it's this constant process, because that's really what it is. People hear death rebirth process and they think that it's this one big event that happens to you in your life. You have one big rebirth. And it's not. It's this constant. We go through these cycles over and over again. And you go through the death process and then you rebirth into something new. And it's really beautiful when you can allow that to happen. And after some time, after you've experienced this for a few years, you can start to recognize the signals of when it starts happening, when the death process is starting, and then you can surrender to it more quickly and easily, hopefully.
Yes.
And then as you go through the phase of that, the death process being letting go of things, letting go of aspects of yourself that are no longer serving you, and then the rebirth process is that all of that resistance to allowing the new to come in. And, what I've often found is that through that death rebirth process, you're being asked to let go, which is really difficult and can be really scary, to let go of your identity or the labels that you've put on yourself or the career that you had and how that shaped your own view of yourself. But oftentimes, when you rebirth into the next phase, those things do come back again, but in a new form.
Yes.
Letting go of something doesn't necessarily mean that's it, it's out of your life, it's gone, you're never going to do that again, you're never going to be that person again. It's more about the process of letting it go.
Yes.
Than about whether or not it's going to come back in the next cycle.
Absolutely.
It's about that trust and faith to surrender it all and see what is left when you come out on the other side, or what is now arising as you come out the other side.
Yes, and it's this constant state of renewal as well, like allowing yourself to be in a space where you are open to that renewal. Because again, it just kind of reminds me of the fact that the only thing that really is constant in our lives is change and flux, and allowing ourselves to be open to that change and not resist what that change means that more can happen. So that resilience and that ability to flow with change, the ability to allow yourself to see another way and be as adaptable as possible, to fit yourself into new spaces and environments. Because as human beings, we are extremely adaptable. That is one thing. Like we can change and not even remember that we've changed, because we adapt so quickly. A lot has happened to show that is actually just our very nature, that we are extremely adaptable, but when we resist that adaptability, that's when it becomes quite difficult. So if you can get yourself to the state of, again, being open to being new every day, like renewing your mind and allowing yourself to just, approach situations for what they are right now, rather than what they have been, what they might be, where, all of these other things that our minds make stories and these these really grand stories out of. Allowing ourselves to just be like, how am I responding to this now, today, in this moment? Allowing
I love that. Well, making the choice for each day to be an opportunity for rebirth.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Treating each day as the rebirth.
The rebirth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
As you were talking about that now, it just sort of struck me how, yes, as humans, we are so incredibly adaptable,
Mm-hmm.
and yet
Mm-hmm.
it is our default reaction to resist change at all costs.
Yes. Yes.
That's exactly where the human struggle comes in.
Exactly. That I think that is the main
we don't
point
want,
of our
we don't
human
want
condition.
things to change. We want everything to, even while we desire change, we think,
Yes.
I want this, I have this goal, I desire this. But our actions in the day,
Mm-hmm.
day to day, what they really boil down to is that we are resisting change of any sort because we get so comfortable with where we are.
Yeah.
And what I always find really helpful
Mm.
when I find myself in that mental space is to remind myself that that is simply an evolutionary function of my brain.
Absolutely.
My brain is trying to protect me by keeping me safe, by keeping me in the environment that I know, that is familiar to me. That is an evolutionary trait of the human brain that has kept us safe.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can recognize that and remind yourself of that, then when you are trying to do something new, or you're trying to make a change, maybe you're trying to change your career, or you know that you need to get out of your relationship, or you want to move house, but you just can't let go of the house that you're in. It really helps to remind yourself, this is my brain trying to keep me safe.
Yes, absolutely.
But this is no longer what I want.
Yes.
And going out and getting the thing that I do want is not dangerous to me.
Right.
It's not a tiger hiding behind the bush.
Yes.
So it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be scary. I am going to feel fear, not only in my mind, but maybe also in my body.
Mm-hmm.
But I am safe. And this is what I want. This is what I'm choosing to go after. Rather than allowing that evolutionary switch in our brain to control our lives and run our lives for us. Because then we end up making decisions around this fear of change.
Of change. Yeah. No, I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's a pretty astute way to look at. Yeah, our greatest strength is also obviously our greatest weakness, and really understanding that and giving ourselves compassion for that, just like you're saying, to actually just say, this is something that has helped me to this point, but now this no longer serves me. This isn't something that I need to do at the same intensity as if I were in a state of survival. And I think that's also kind of a expansion in the consciousness of humanity, and we really are opening up the way that we think about how we are living. Because I feel like the conversations that I'm having with a lot of people are about, well, what else is possible? Both is there another way? And that seems to be just, again, an opening up in the understanding of how we've been seeing things, how we have been living and having to survive, and now this new kind of iteration of our psyche being afforded this space to now choose something else. Survival obviously was survival has always been the point of evolution and whatnot. But now, how do we advance that? How do we take it to a new level now that we don't have those same threats? Maybe stress is definitely one of our greatest threats, and all of these other things that we find ourselves in a mental health battle with. But how do we now start to choose a different way? How do we allow ourselves to be in this space of we don't need to survive anymore? So how do we actually give into this deeper thriving space? Yeah.
And I think that requires deconstructing a lot of the societal conditions that we've been brought up with.
Absolutely.
This was actually something that popped up into my mind just now when you were speaking about how you made these changes and allowing for the space for things to just flow. Something that popped into my mind was how we're raised with this idea that you need to have it all figured out by the age of 18. You need
It's hilarious,
you
right?
need to know what you're going to go study, and then you go study that thing, and then you start your career, and then that's it.
Right.
And you get married,
Yes.
and then you have 2.5 kids and a white picket fence. And I think this generation is very much rewriting that script.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Or at least examining it.
Yeah, asking the questions. Like, do I really need to have it all figured out? And that's why I love seeing people like yourself, where you're rewriting the story in your 30s. Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Don't actually know how old you are. Just took a guess that we're about the same age. And that's something that I've done myself. And I think that a lot of people don't realize, they don't even allow for the possibility that you can do that.
Yes.
They think that by the time you've hit your 30s, it's
You're
too
done.
late.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Whatever you've been doing, that's it now.
Yes.
You're stuck with that and you can't make a change.
Yeah. Bizarre.
When
right?
really you can change at any age. You can reinvent yourself over and over again. You can go study something new. You can start a new career.
Absolutely.
I mean, my partner Wesley has a friend, a very dear friend, who's a much older woman. She's, I think she's almost 70 now.
Yeah.
She might have just turned 70. And she just decided recently that she's going to go study science, and she's going to get a master's in science. So Wes has been helping her with that because he's a chemical engineer, obviously. So, and I just found that so inspiring. So when you told me about it, my first reaction was like, why? What's she going to do? And then I was like, wow, what a shitty question to ask, right? Isn't it amazing and inspiring that she just decided, I'm going to go do this because it interests me and this is what I want to do?
Absolutely.
Rather than us thinking, you finish school and then you go study and then that's that.
Yeah. I mean, how many 18-year-olds really are going to go study for the pursuit of knowledge? It's because it's something that they've been told that they have to do.
Yeah.
If people were given a choice,
how many 18-year-olds really and truly know what they want to do with their life?
I barely remember being 18. So anything that I learned in that time, it just does. It doesn't really connect to, again, who I am today, or no time is wasted, but the space that I was in back then is completely different. I was a completely different person. I had completely different awareness and understanding, and my view of the world was so much more limited. And I think that's something we just don't give, again, enough space and opportunity.
You don't know yourself.
You really don't.
You don't know who you are yet.
But you think that you do.
Yeah.
Because you think you know everything. Because you don't. Because there's literally a phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger theory that if the more that you know, the more you realize that you don't know. But if you are on the end of the spectrum where you actually don't know that much, you don't have that experience, you have this idea that you know everything because you don't know how much you don't know. You know. So I think it's also just really to humble ourselves and to realize that we don't have to have it all figured out, and imparting that on the people that are going through those processes, whether that person is 5, 18, or 55, allowing people the space to not know, and allowing ourselves the space to not know, is how we almost breed more creativity in this society. Because, I mean, just like you were saying, like my 75-year-old mother this year decided to start senior bush excursions, for over 55s. Yeah, which I think is incredible. Yeah. Because that's just something that, again, she's like, I'm not done. Like, I'm not done living, and I really just, I love the bush and I love people, so I'm going to find a way to connect those two passions because I'm still here. I'm still alive. And I think so many people are in the space of waiting for the day that they the day that they have the money, or, have the knowledge, or have the partner, or whatever it may be, that they prolong, those things and those experiences, because it's like you're always just kind of giving it to tomorrow or giving it to another time. But life is always just happening right now, no matter what age you are, no matter what space you're in. You always have the choice to do something else. Like, I mean, there's that very simplistic but really beautifully profound statement that, like, if you do not like the way that you are living or the things that are happening in your life, move. You are not a tree. You can allow yourself to move around and shift and change. It's just dependent on your ability to roll with those changes and be open to the uncertain and the unknown. To be honest, life has always been uncertain. Life has always been, up in the air and unknown. We've just lured ourselves or maybe given ourselves more space than we need to be in this lulled state of false security, like that everything's going to happen as we think it will happen. And that when things happen outside of our plan, that's the worst thing in the world. It's really not. Usually those instances where things completely outside of our control happen to us can breed some of the most beautiful lessons in our lives if we allow them to, if we open ourselves up to understanding that, what is this teaching me? Coming back to that lesson.
Yeah. I love to tell clients life is the journey, not the destination, because I think so often all of us, we fall into that trap of focusing so hard on what it is, what we want, the goal, that we forget to really enjoy the here and now and the journey of getting there.
Yeah.
Because when you learn how to enjoy the journey of getting there, at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter so much whether or not you get there.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my mind literally, as you were speaking, just went to my trip to get to South Africa, because it was a real journey to get here, and I kept reminding myself of exactly that. Like, all of these things kept happening with, obviously, like, the new variant of COVID came out right as we booked our flight. Omicron came out, and we were just in the state of, like, are we even going to get there? Is this going to happen? And I, instead of letting myself get too wrapped up in that cycle of emotion, because it was a very emotional state, and don't get me wrong, I definitely let myself wallow a couple of times, because having, like, a high moment of, yes, we booked the flight and it's going to happen, to a low moment of, I don't even know if we're going to be able to leave the city. Just reminding myself that this is the journey, actually, like, and this is something that I had wanted to do from, a good intention of, like, wanting to surprise my mom, be there for my friend's wedding, and that's enough. Like, that's actually enough. That to be in that place where I have that love and support, that I can even try to get to, even want to put myself in the situation to do that. That's enough for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes maybe I had to remind myself, maybe I won't get there, but all my efforts will be enough. It won't be in vain for any reason, because, like, that love is still the thing that's driving me. So I hope that makes sense. But just to kind of keep reminding yourself that even if things aren't ideal, it is about the journey. It's still, you can still stay in those moments of, this will also pass. This, I come back to this quote very, very often. I have it tattooed on my body so that I remember it. But this too shall pass. Yeah. And realizing and allowing yourself to be in that state of, actually, this is a situation that's happening. I can be here for a moment, but I know that this will also change.
Yeah.
It's important.
Everything will change.
Everything will change.
The good and the bad.
Exactly. Don't get yourself stuck there too long, and realize that if there's bad, there will eventually be good. If there's good, there will eventually be bad. Like, it's all a constant flow and all a constant process.
And something I really reminded myself of recently, I went through a little bit of a rough patch. I know a lot of people might not really be able to relate to this, because perhaps they don't understand the depth of relationship that you can have with a horse. But my horse, like my dear horse, that was, like, really, really the most special horse that I've ever had, and I had a really special relationship with her. She died a couple of weeks ago in December.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. And I was surprised at how hard it hit me, because she wasn't still with me. I had sent her back to the stud farm where she was bred, and she'd been there for a couple of years already. So it wasn't like I was with her every day and then I lost her. I hadn't seen her in a couple of years.
Wow.
And even though she was on my mind a lot, I knew she was in a good place and she was happy. So I was really taken by surprise at how the grief hit me when I got the news that she died. And so I went through a rough patch of 2 weeks. I was feeling depressed. I was grieving her. I wasn't sleeping. And at first I was resisting the grief, I think because part of me was like, but this is not a person. Like, this can't compare to when I lost my brother. But I really had to let myself go into that space of like really grieving her every bit as much as I grieved my brother, and letting myself feel the depth of that pain of losing her. And in that space, I reminded myself that the beauty of life and what we are here to experience is the highs and the lows. You can't experience the highs without the lows.
Absolutely.
And how low you can go into the depths of those quote-unquote negative emotions is equal to how high you can go into the quote-unquote positive emotions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so it really helped me when I was in that space, after not having been in that space in quite some years, that it's okay. I don't have to try and avoid this feeling, because this is the human experience. It's why I'm here. I'm here to experience the full breadth and range of emotions. Because how boring is life when we just close that sphere down to one little range of emotions. Like I know if you're not watching on video, you're not going to see what I'm doing with my hands, but I'm sort of visualizing, like if you imagine the rainbow of colors, and instead of seeing the full range of the entire rainbow, you're only seeing one color.
Absolutely.
And so often we don't allow ourselves to go there because the emotions that we perceive as negative feel yucky. Bless you.
Excuse me.
But when we can allow ourselves to experience those lows, we open up this possibility to experience highs that we've never experienced before.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that you went through that. And again, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I had a very similar thing happen to me also at the end of last year. My dog that I sent him to a foster home because I was traveling so much, and so I'd rehomed him with these people that like foster small dogs, and so he was very happy, very settled. He'd been living there also for 2 years, and I also found out that he passed away right in the week of my birthday.
Wow.
And I had a very similar, like as you were speaking, I really just resonated with all of the things you were saying. Very similar reaction of like, but he's not mine anymore. He's not my dog anymore. So I feel like I can't grieve this in the same way. But there also, like, from my biggest loss, the loss of my father, having that experience of like going to, as you were saying, the most, the deepest emotional kind of depths that I've experienced, and the deepest emotional lows that I've experienced. Having the capacity to actually be in that space and to sit in that space is what really helped to kind of guide me to grieve and to grieve for anything that I've lost. Since that's happened, it's always just allowed my emotions to open up in such a profound way to really feel those things instead of trying to push them away or just letting it just sit in my body or whatnot. To allow that to just move through and realizing that was an energy that like was impactful on my energy, and to honor it for what it was. Yeah, that is something that is a part of the human condition, and that's why I will always have such deep, profound respect for the human condition. That we all have to, get ourselves to the space of allowing those emotions to, and it comes back to allowing yourself to feel the things that come to you when things are really difficult, because then you have the ability to appreciate and understand the things that are really amazing if you give yourself that emotional range and that depth. So, yeah.
Grief is a topic that I'm quite passionate about because of my experience of losing my brother and going through it. I've always been so thankful that it happened when it did, because I always say if it had even happened 1 year prior, I wouldn't have had the capacity to allow myself to go as deep into my grief as I did. Because when it happened, I had already been doing a lot of work on myself. I'd been through a journey that allowed me the emotional capacity and maturity to recognize that if I don't let myself grieve properly now, this is going to affect me for the rest of my life. And so I'm so grateful that I was able to allow that for myself. But in that space, I became aware of how uncomfortable other people are with that. Because as a society, we hold no space for grief.
Yeah.
Which is really sad, because if you look at all the traditional tribal cultures have very specific grieving culture.
Yes.
There's so much space held for it. And there are specific rituals and things that you do, and you grieve for a year. And when you actually go through the grieving process, then you suddenly realize why it was like that, because it all makes so much sense.
Absolutely.
And it's tragic how in our modern society, grief is something that is very much swept under the carpet and ignored. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to deal with it. You go grieve over there in the privacy of your own home. Don't show me. Come back to work. Be fine.
Yes.
And I would say that that is a huge contributing factor in the amount of mental health issues that we have, 100%. Addiction, just despair in people, because everybody loses somebody at some point or goes through a tragedy. And if you don't allow yourself to grieve who you've lost or what you've lost or the part of yourself that you lost in a trauma, it sticks in your body, sticks in your emotions, and it impacts your daily life, even if you don't realize that's what's happening. Suddenly you're drinking more, or you're eating emotionally, or you're shopping emotionally, or whatever it is. There are so many different ways that we plaster those things, but until you actually deal with it, you let yourself go through the grieving process, even if it's 10 years later, you're never going to really come to a place of peace and find joy in life again. And you know, the other beautiful thing about going through that grieving process and allowing yourself to really go through the depths of it is that you learn that there is light at the end of the tunnel. You learn that it doesn't last forever. Because the first time you go through it, it feels like this is never going to end. I will never be okay again. My life is ruined now, and this is it. That's how it feels when you're in it.
Absolutely.
And then when you come out of it, you learn that it's okay and it's safe to let yourself go there again, because you're going to come out of it.
Exactly, because you can also flow through it. So many points to kind of touch on from what you just said.
That was a lot.
But I completely understand, because we don't hold the space for grief. One thing that I really noticed when I was going through my big grief is that as I was grieving, it almost opened up the space for other people to grieve or to speak about their grief. So I would say what I was going through, like I would tell someone that that my father was dying or in the process of dying, or that he had passed away. And it would almost allow them space to be like, oh, I had someone pass away. And I found it very interesting how often that happened during that very raw period, where I would say that I was just very honest with people about the state that I was in, and how many people would actually respond with their own grief or their own stuff that they had gone through that maybe they hadn't been able to actually express. And these were people who were like, oh yeah, I lost my partner 25 years ago, and I'm like, wow. You're still. That's still so impactful, and that you're still holding that in such a deep way, like almost to move some people to tears. that also just showed me that we really don't allow that space to just, be sad in public. I remember I also took a trip shortly after my father died, and I was sitting on a bench in the Czech Republic in a forest, just crying, and like looking at the beautiful green, and looking at the people pass by, and just kind of having a moment of like being very immersed in the human condition, and looking at all of these people experiencing these different emotions, and feeling like I would never get to experience anything other than what I was experiencing in that moment. And this man came over and sat next to me, and he was just like, "Do you need a hospital?" And I was like, I was sobbing a little bit, and I think in his limited English, that was all he could really muster up. I was like, and that actually brought me right out of that grief and back into joy and laughing at just the simplicity of like,
Yeah.
No, like, no, I don't need a hospital. I'm just letting myself cry. And he was like, I don't think he understood that, because he moved on shortly after. But just really giving ourselves that space to actually feel what we're feeling is just, it's incomparable. And like moving to a culture that really does celebrate death has been such an interesting shift for me, because obviously growing up in South Africa, like you were saying, like grief is not necessarily discussed. There's not really an open format or forum for it. I was raised in the church, so it definitely was more discussed in the circles that I moved in, but just generally as a society, we're not as open about grief as a culture like Mexico, which I was supposed to be attending a music festival, and they were like, "We're actually not doing the music festival today because someone in the town has died, so the town has shut down." Down the town, and everyone like did a parade through the town, was singing in the streets, and then everyone went over to someone's house, and they had a whole village cookout for this person.
So beautiful.
And it was just such a beautiful acknowledgement. And I mean, there's the Day of the Dead festival every year as well, where there's also just like so much acknowledgement of those who have passed, those who have impacted the culture, have impacted the society, and to celebrate and talk about them, and like almost give their souls that, that space to not anything weird, but just to acknowledge that they have been here.
I just got goosebumps as you described that story, because wow, that really struck me, because I can remember when my brother died, to me, it felt like the world had stopped.
Yes.
Dead.
Absolutely.
And that my life was falling apart. And I wonder how vastly different an experience it would have been if everybody had stopped along with me and held that space for me and my family, instead of it almost feeling like such a deep insult that around me the world was continuing on as though nothing had happened. Yeah. I know exactly what you mean in that way, because I think that's the hardest thing, is that life just seems to move on, and people just seem to move on, and you are still in this isolated moment in time for a while. Going, how can you?
Exactly.
How can the world? That was something that I remember feeling really shocked by.
Yes.
I was like, how can the world still be carrying on?
Yes.
How is it possible that everything is still quote unquote normal when it's very definitely not normal and it's not okay? Like, he's not here anymore. Right. How can everything just carry on?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's it is such a vulnerable space to sit in, to just be in that state of, I feel like I won't be able to move forward from this place because he can't move forward. But it's almost like that's kind of the lesson of those left behind, like how that situation will transform you, how that death will actually be a death not only in your life, but a rebirth in your life as well, because it's just a transformation of energy, really, and allowing yourself to take that hurt and that pain and maybe transmute it into something else that can serve the legacy of that your lost loved one in a more profound and beautiful way for the people who are left behind, and those people that you will touch. So
beautifully said. That's
you.
exactly it.
That was one thing. I was fortunate enough to work with a death doula while my dad was passing away, and it's one question that he kept asking me that I at the time didn't really make sense, but as time went on after his passing, I really just kept coming back to, how will the situation change me? How will I be transformed from this? And comes back to that feeling of renewal as well. Like, will I stay stuck in those feelings and like let myself sit in that energy, or can this be something else? Like, can I take this and obviously move with it in a way that will help me to create whatever I'm trying to create moving forward, rather than staying back? Makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
About a year ago, I read a beautiful book by Jodi Picoult called The Book of Two Ways. I love her writing, but the main character was a death doula. And I wouldn't say I'd never come across the concept. I was like vaguely aware of it, but I'd never really given it much thought. And it was so interesting to read that book and think of this thing, this profession of a death doula, and how beautiful and necessary that is, especially in this culture where we don't allow any space for that.
Yep, absolutely. It's and it's also just, if not comforting, it's also very practical, because there's a lot of things that your mind can't even wrap itself around if you are with someone who is dying. You don't think about the things that will happen after, and this having someone to kind of help facilitate that process and ask the hard questions about realistic things like internet passwords and like bank details and like all of the things that, again, you're not thinking about the practical everyday stuff. It was really helpful to have someone think about the stuff that after he was gone we wouldn't be able to access, and ask us to get those details from him, rather than, and I know obviously not everyone has the same experience of death. Some deaths are very sudden, some deaths are very different, but if you are going through the process of someone dying in your life, having a death doula, I couldn't recommend it more. Or reaching out to someone who has that knowledge to help you transition into the next iteration of your life as much as that other person.
So just quickly, if somebody's listening and they have no idea what we're talking about, what is a death doula?
So a death doula is basically a person who helps to facilitate end of life practices, in end of life, in all end of life admin and administration. So
practical and emotional,
practical
as well,
and
right?
emotional, exactly. So that's someone who kind of acts as a counselor, who talks to the family, who actually who makes sure that everyone is dealing with it in their own way, and like has some kind of understanding of what is actually happening, so that there is awareness. Then they also, again, help to deal with the more practical aspects like will and testament, and like, again, making sure that you have access to internet passwords, bank details, accounts, all of the things that, again, you're not really thinking about when someone is dying. There's too much higher level stuff that's going on, obviously. So this is a person that's very practical in the actual experience of death, and also very helpful and supportive. So it's a death doula.
Love that. I'm glad that you got to have that experience.
Thank you. Me too.
Well, it's such an interesting conversation. Wasn't at all what I expected.
Seriously.
But I think we went to some really beautiful places.
Thank you.
So I'm going to wrap us up just with a couple of like more light-hearted questions, unrelated to what we spoke about. is there a book that you're currently reading, and or is there one specific book that you would highly recommend everybody read?
Yes. Okay. All right. So yes, the book, I am reading a book at the moment. I'm not entirely sure. The author's mind slips my mind, but it is called The Leader's Mind. And it's basically a compilation of different stories of different people in different professions who have taken leadership roles in and taken leadership mindsets in different situations. So all the way from a fireman leading a really intense rescue, to a pilot trying to land a plane, to like Michael Jordan's coach. So it's pretty much just a compilation of all of these stories to talk about like what actually makes a leader, and how you can start to employ a leadership mindset into your everyday work, into your life, and into managing yourself and your time. Because I think everyone is a leader, and I think that leadership is something that we are almost tasked to self-direct. Because as a leader, you have to self-direct. Self-direct, and so reading resources like that really helps me to kind of keep myself centered in that. So I really enjoy nonfiction books. I give myself like one fiction book every 3 months, just to keep my imagination kind of active and going. But nonfiction lands a little bit more for me, and I don't force myself to finish nonfiction books, because usually when I really feel like I resonate with the message, I'll either devour it in a day, or I get the kind of message that I need or the information that I need, and then I move on to the next. So that's the thing. One book that I absolutely love, and I'm going to completely butcher the author's name because it's like very, very Russian. It's called Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, I think.
I will put it in the show notes. I know which book you're talking about.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So Mihai is like Mihaly. It's spelled like that. But yeah, it's just the most profound definition of what it actually does mean to put yourself into a flow state, what it means to choose the things that you love, to be in flow with the rest of your life. And it like just really, again, practically talks about what flow is and how you find yourself there. It gives a lot of really interesting examples too of like, again, you can see I like the anecdotes of other people's stories of like athletes and other high performers who have found themselves in this space of almost forgetting the time is even passing, because they are in such a space of creation and ultimate flow and silence. And it's just a really, really wonderful telling of, how you can start to cultivate more of that in your life.
That's a great recommendation. I actually came across that book a few years ago and really wanted to read it, and then I forgot about it. So thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, no, definitely give it a read. It's a really fun read. I actually listened to it in October now. I listened to it on Audible, and it's actually really good to listen to as well, because it just kind of it gives you like little practices to do during the course of reading the book.
Okay. That
really helps you to just check in with, again, like, how am I actually inviting this flow into my life, and how am I allowing myself to do things? All about the allowing. Yeah.
What is one daily practice that you think everybody should adopt?
Focusing on the breath, learning how to breathe properly. Yeah, I think that's the beginning and end of a lot of things. Because just like we were talking about grief and understanding where you're at emotionally, the breath is probably the best check-in point that we have as human beings to be with our bodies. Because not everyone's going to, want to move and do things to check in with themselves. So the first movement that we have is the breath. So just learning how to consciously breathe, learning how to regulate the breath, learning how to use the breath as a tool rather than as something that, is just not even a thought, I think can be so so instrumental in helping people to just shift their states, not only physical but emotional and mental states. And it's so simple. It's so simple, and it's free.
So simple and so powerful.
So powerful, and just once you learn it, you can't unknow it. And I think the more you become aware of the breath, the more aware of the breath you become. So that's I think that's why every single person should get some kind of daily breathing breathwork practice. It has nothing to do with any of the the things that are trying to be sold to us, or like you have to do this to look this way or whatever. It's just human nature, just breathing and connecting to your life force.
Yeah. If people are interested in your work or want to work with your company, how can they get hold of you?
So you can find me on all the social medias. My personal account is Tarin Calmeyer. That's TarinCalmeyer. So Tarin with an I. And if you want to get in touch with my company, we are Remote Team Wellness, and we are remoteteamwellness.com and Remote Team Wellness on all the social medias.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for
Thank you for a beautiful conversation. Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah. It's just been wonderful to chat to you and explore things that, again, having these conversations just helps us all to grow and expand in our own awareness. So
Absolutely.
The more you facilitate these conversations,
that's why I'm doing this.
Exactly. The more you facilitate these conversations, the more opportunity we all have to to really expand and to learn together.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being so vulnerable and authentic, because that's what makes it work.
Yeah. True story.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please like, share with your family and friends, and subscribe on whichever platform you're listening. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Instagram @rain.dunn or email me on rain@raindunn.com to learn more about my different services and offers and explore how we can work together to help you find more vibrance and expansion in your life. Visit my website, raindunn.com.